I'm Veronica Marshall at the Capitol. This week on Senate Spotlight, protecting workers or supporting small businesses. The two ideas were treated as opposing sides as senators debated modifications to the state's earned sick and safe time law.
There are people right now today that have paid sick time, that have the protections of earned sick and safe time to leave a domestic violence situation, to get strep throat and stay home or go to the doctor to get it treated, to take care of their 9-month-old who was in the hospital, was in the PICU.
When you put businesses out of business and have these workers that used to have jobs no longer have jobs, that's even more harmful to the worker than before.
We'll tell you which way a majority of the senators voted. And
it's really important in these moments that impact people's lives so personally that we take the time to go talk to them directly and let them know that we're lending our support.
Iron Range Senator Grant Hauschild shares his priorities and successes this session, including extending unemployment benefits for minors and permitting reform. Plus, Senator Steve Green says he can take the heat.
Too many times, legislators like to push their authority off on somebody else so they don't have to take the heat for it. That's why we're here. And so I believe that these agencies have way too much authority. We need to rein it in.
His ideas on how to break up bureaucracy and give local government more of a say. That's all coming up.
Senate Spotlight is produced by the Minnesota Senate and Senate Media Services.
With the session drawing closer to an end, we're now asking senators to reflect on their work over the last few months. This first-term senator says he's delivering for the Northland. With me now is DFL Senator Grant Hauschild. Senator, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Senator, a focus of yours is bipartisanship. You're a leader on the Civility Caucus, and you're part of the state's only bipartisan town hall this year. So at a time like this, when it can feel like we're politically isolated and there can be some political danger in reaching across the aisle, why do you do it?
Well, I think people expect it. I represent a district that is represented by 2 Republicans in the House and myself as a Democrat in the Senate. It's a district that voted for Donald Trump at the presidential level, but Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith at the Senate level. So these are folks that I think vote across the aisle. They vote for the person, and they vote for people that they think are going to deliver for them. And that's really what I'm focused on. And I have to make sure that I'm working with my House colleagues and others across the aisle in order to do that.
That's right. It's not just the Senate. All right. Another recurring theme of yours is a love for town halls. You recently had one in Ely that was really well attended. So what do you like about that format and what have you learned?
What I really love about town halls is in these small towns that I represent, folks come from all over and they get to talk to each other in addition to me. So we get to have a conversation, not just a sort of panel of questions straight at me. And I think that's really interesting because there's a lot of issues that folks have differing opinions on. And rather than just me answer, we get to sort of have a circular conversation with folks in the community. And as you can imagine, whether it's mining issues or, regulatory issues, there's things that people have differing opinions. And we have to make sure we're having a candid conversation about those topics.
And it also lets you know what community resources there if they're part of the conversation. So that's a really great point. During a recent floor session, you sought to add an amendment to an omnibus bill that would keep the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame in Eveleth. So was it a town hall that brought this to your attention, or where did this idea come from?
Yeah, the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame has been in Eveleth for years. It was really selected because of the rich history of hockey on the Iron Range, and I was informed by a couple of citizens who are involved in that effort that there was something happening where folks were looking at possibly relocating it. So that really rang the alarm bells for me because this is a really important part of the history on the Iron Range. So I did some digging and I really looked into it and I thought, you know what, if they're going to relocate the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, then let's make sure that state dollars don't get utilized for that move. If they want to do it, they should raise private funds, they should figure out a different way of doing it, but the state shouldn't endorse that type of move.
Okay. An amendment you did have success with was relating to extending unemployment benefits for minors. And true to you, you met with these workers who had been laid off, and your co-author of the amendment was from the other caucus. However, it's not across the finish line yet. The House still hasn't passed it. So what do you want your House colleagues to know?
Well, I went and met with the steelworkers that were laid off. I brought the majority leader up there. I think it's really important in these moments that impact people's lives so personally that we take the time time to go talk to them directly and let them know that we're lending our support as their legislators. So I wanted to make sure and do that first and foremost. I also reached across the aisle with Senator Farnsworth and got to work on the extension in unemployment. This is really important because if we have bipartisan support, it's that much more likely to make it across the finish line at the end of the day, especially given the fact that the House is split, right? And so my message to the House is, let's get this done. We have bipartisan support out of the Senate. It was nearly unanimous. Now the House can act and we can go to conference and figure this out.
Okay. My next question somewhat relates to mining, but more in the sense of data mining. So during a committee meeting on a proposed tax for social media companies, you gave one of the most impassioned responses I have seen yet. So what is it about that topic that you really connected with?
Well, I think when we talk about social media companies, this is really an addicting thing, right? We see folks on their phones all the time. I mean, I'm one of them myself. But when I see that and the fact that these folks are not really paying their fair share for the personal data that I think they are taking from individuals in Minnesota. So what we're saying is these 14 or 15 social media companies that are some of the wealthiest companies in the world should really pay their fair share in Minnesota if they're going to take Minnesotans' personal data. And I equated it to mining, right? When we mine taconite, when we look at precious metals in Minnesota, and in fact, even helium in northern Minnesota now, we make sure that we tax those extractions because they're taking something from us, and we should get our fair share as community members and people as part of that extraction. I think it's the same thing with personal data. We're just moving it into the new century of saying, you're going to take our personal data, you're getting it for free, you're able to do some advertising and make money on this. Let's make sure that Minnesota gets our fair share from this.
Right? Conversation was about updating our tax code and how the economy works now.
Exactly. I mean, you're always, and that's what I love most about being on the tax committee, is you're always looking at, okay, this is the way we have done it to make sure we have the revenue we need in order to provide the core services we do, but economies change, people change, technology changes, so we always have to update the way we do our taxes to make sure that it's fair and equitable.
Well, speaking of changes and updating, you wrote an op-ed about permitting reform, and you said it's all about jobs. So take me through the issue and any proposed solutions you have.
Yeah, when Governor Perpich, first ran, his slogan was jobs, 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 and I think that couldn't be further from the truth, or it couldn't be closer to the truth. Excuse me. We need to make sure that at the end of the day, we are providing folks the opportunity to provide for their families. And that means making sure that Minnesota is competitive both nationally and now globally. It means making sure that folks on the ground, when they experience government, whether they're an entrepreneur that's opening a small business or perhaps an industry that wants to open up a shop that could provide hundreds of jobs, that we in Minnesota have a process that works for them. That's what permitting reform is about. It's about a process not to skirt any environmental laws, not to skirt labor laws, because certainly those two things are very important to Minnesotans, but we should be a little bit more efficient and be competitive with other states and globally if we want jobs in Minnesota.
It's funny that you mentioned a slogan, jobs, 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 because there's a slogan that comes in my mind when I think about you. A national politician said, I have a plan for that. And it seems like that fits in with you very well, too, because I looked at who authored the most bills in the Senate this session, and it was you. So you have a plan for that. How and why did you accomplish that?
I've been involved in politics since I was really young, about 13 or 14 years old, and I have a lot of experience working for congressmen, U.S. senators in the White House administration for the Obama administration, and so I really kind of know how government works. And so when I got here as a freshman, I really did, frankly, have a plan on what the things that I wanted to accomplish that I thought mattered most for my community. And I think when you do that work and show that you understand how to get the job done, other folks gravitate towards that and they say, you know what, I think that person knows how to get the job done and knows what he's doing. So frankly, I sometimes have to talk to my staff to say, okay, we're getting a lot of requests here. We're getting a lot of folks that have bills that they feel are really important. We need to prioritize, but also I do want to take it on because I do think I can lend myself to helping accomplish the goals that folks have. So that's how it works. We keep pushing. We work really hard in my office, and I try to make sure that my staff feel appreciated because it is a lot of work.
Okay. What would you consider to be your biggest achievement this session?
I think it goes back to the steelworker unemployment extension. There are 630 steelworkers right now that are facing a real uncertain future. We don't know what's going to happen with mining. We don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. And these are folks that are really some of the biggest parts of our economy on the Iron Range and in northern Minnesota. consider the fact that the equivalent of this shutdown on the Iron Range is as if Target or 3M shut down in the Twin Cities. I mean, that's the economic impact that we are facing with these shutdowns. And so I want to make sure that at the end of the day, these folks stay in our community. They could go try to find jobs elsewhere, but then we lose that skilled workforce that could reopen these mines eventually. And it's not that easy to get that workforce back in a place like Ely or Virginia up on the Iron Range. So this is about keeping the families in our communities, keeping our schools full, keeping food on the table for Iron Rangers, and that's what we're going to deliver this session.
Speaking of, this session, what about next session? What do you hope to achieve then?
Well, it's going to be a policy year next year, and so I think there's a lot of things we could work on. One of them in particular is the helium discovery that we have in northern Minnesota. This year I've been working really diligently with all the stakeholders on how we can produce a framework both from a tax structure as well as a regulatory and rulemaking process for that helium discovery, because in Minnesota we don't have a gas framework. We've never done gas extraction in Minnesota. And so we've worked through the process. We've gone through all the committees. Unfortunately, just given everything that's happening this year, I'm not exactly sure if we'll get all of that accomplished this year, but it's been a really good start, sort of having these conversations, getting people up to speed on sort of all the complications that go into creating a new regulatory framework. And then I think next year, because it'll be policy focused, we can really make sure that we do that right.
Okay. Senator, anything else you'd like to say while we have you here?
No, other than I really enjoy this work. I mean, I really love representing northern Minnesota. I really think we need to make sure that we're punching above our weight up in greater Minnesota and northern Minnesota, because sometimes it can feel like the Twin Cities and the suburbs get all the attention. And there are so many amazing things about northern Minnesota, whether it's the outdoor recreation and the tourism, whether it's mining or the timber that we provide for the critical things we use every day. Northern Minnesota is a special place, and without it, Minnesota wouldn't be the same. So I'm really proud of where I represent, and I'm going to keep delivering as much as I can.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
While the protections of workers is a priority for me, we cannot ignore the needs of our business community.
This week, DFL Senator Judy Seeberger presented Senate File 2300, which modifies the state's earned sick and safe time law. She said the bill makes modest common sense improvements to the program, and it responds to concerns from businesses across the state.
I have heard of an employee calling off a shift on short notice and using earned sick and safe time because their car wouldn't start. Not only does this impact the employer's ability to maintain adequate staffing, it puts a burden on the other workers who now need to pick up the slack. The improvements made by my bill include changes to the notice and documentation provisions, to the more generous leave provisions, and clarifies concerns with regard to front-loading of earned sick and safe time.
While Senator Seeberger says the bill represents a true bipartisan effort, it was still met with some resistance from both sides of the aisle.
If you look at the labor unions who've spoken out to say, please don't do this, this is not a good idea, this is going to hurt our members, and they're trying to advocate for nurses, for farm workers, for the people who would be affected by this bill in really negative ways. And these are labor unions that disproportionately represent women and people of color. I just feel like if we were talking about other workers, this bill would have never even maybe been introduced.
The reforms in Senate File 2300 don't go far enough. I appreciate the A7 amendment today, which raised the limit from 1 to 3 employees for micro businesses, but it fails to address the many other micro businesses that are still struggling.
Micro businesses, 4 employees, 5 employees, 3 employees, the wild compliance uncertainty, we've just created a mess. And I can tell you, there is not one thing about your health that is determined by the size of your employer.
These are reasonable changes, and it's still, I want to reiterate, Minnesota will have the most generous earned sick and safe time policy and paid family leave policy in the country, and I'm proud of that. But that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to make a couple of changes here and there that help make sure that Minnesota can be competitive statewide.
While I wish that this bill went much further and was more responsive to the feedback that we've heard from small business owners across the state, I will be voting for this bill today and encourage members to support it because it has meaningful improvements that will help Minnesota's economic vitality.
And I think it's only right as a legislator that we listen to our constituents, make the changes that benefit the most people. And that's what I think we have done.
With the addition of 2 amendments, the bill passed on a vote of 38 to 29. When people advocate for smaller government, that can mean they're in favor of lower taxes and fewer regulations. Some also believe smaller government can lead to a more efficient and flexible system. But it can also mean fewer government services and supports. After serving 10 years in the House, Republican Senator Steve Green ran and won his seat in the Senate. He says despite not being a politician by nature, he's still here, working to keep power on a local level. And he joins us now. Senator, welcome to Senate Spotlight.
Thanks, Veronica. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. So, Senator, you believe in small government. What does that term mean to you? What does that look like?
Small government means just what it says. We've got our legislature, which can fluctuate with whoever gets elected, and that's fine. That's the way it's supposed to be. But we have the agencies behind that, what we call the bureaucracy, that never seems to change or very hard to change in the bureaucracy. And so if we're going to work on small government, we need to limit that bureaucracy, the regulations that they're passing down in the form of rules, get things to come back to the legislature for a vote. And I think too many times legislators like to push their authority off on somebody else so they don't have to take the heat for it. But that's why we're here. And so I believe that these agencies have way too much authority and we need to rein it in.
Now, this term, to balance the budget, some government programs and initiatives have been scaled back. Do you consider this a step in the right direction towards limiting government, or maybe an opportunity for some to observe its benefits?
I think that the policy that we're of cutting back is very good. I don't like the way that it's being done right now. I don't think it was done, or is being done, I should say, in a manner that actually digs into what's being cut and what's not. And it looks to me like the cuts that are proposed coming from the executive branch are mainly designed to do harm to the people of Minnesota. I think there's a lot of places that we could cut, and one of the big ways to do that, I believe, is to cut back on some of the regulations and the mandates that are going down to our local government. The people that we elect on a local level, whether they be county board, city board, school board, they're just like us. We're not special people here. We're just people from the district. And those people are elected locally. They should have the authority to spend that money the way they see best fit for their districts. And I think in that way, we could do away with some of the harmful cuts we're seeing and let them make those cuts where they think are needed in their local areas.
Yeah, that speaks to the flexibility when people talk about local power, local government. Speaking of districts, yours is Senate District 2, which is in Greater Minnesota. What are your constituents there asking for? What do they need?
Right now, mostly what they're asking for is exactly what we've been talking about right now. They want less regulation. They want to be able to live their lives. They're being taxed for property taxes alone. Some of them are losing their homes, and thankfully that's not as widespread as probably other places, but it is a definite problem in my district. If you look at the tax forfeitures every year that are in my counties, and I have some of the poorest counties in the state. Beltrami County, for instance, is I don't know the exact number right now, but approximately 80% of the land is non-taxable. So the other 13 to 20% are picking up all the revenues on a local level for that whole county. And those are things that are really hurting us. And so when we see the shifts that we're making on a state level, instead of passing the authority down without mandates, these counties are going to have to try to make that up, or services are going to go away. And that's where we're going to have the problem. So.
You said previously you don't carry a lot of bills, particularly funding bills, but it was important for you to provide for people who provide us with safety. So talk to me more about that.
Well, I had 2 bills. I think one of them remains. I don't see the other one floating around anymore, but we'll see how it goes. But the one was for a place in my district called Camp Bliss. And it is it's done in such a way where they'll get a grant, but it's a reimbursement grant. So after they provide the services, then they can apply for a reimbursement, and I like that. I talked to many people that have gone there, and I hear nothing but positive feedback. And this is for disabled vets, both physically and mentally disabled, and for their families. And one of the issues that I like about the Camp Bliss one is that it's nice to treat somebody, but if you can't get in with their families and so that they can have that support at home as well, it's very difficult. And the other thing with the Camp Bliss is they're able to talk with other vets. And I'm not a veteran, but I have spoken with many of them, and it's hard for people that aren't in those situations to actually understand what's going on. And some of the best therapy, they're telling me, is when they can get with other people who have experienced the same thing. And that's what I believe this camp does, from checking it out, and it's been successful. And so it's a small portion. It's $150,000 a year for 2 years, and it seems to be working, and so I supported it.
Yeah, I know that camp does equine therapy. It, talks about community resources. It helps the veterans with PTSD and gives them recreation through nature. So it has a lot of really great retreat opportunities. And you mentioned that you're not a veteran. So how did this topic catch your attention?
Well, I'm not a veteran, but I have family members who are, and so that comes, and friends who are. And it actually first came about with some folks I know from the Vietnam War and the issues that they face. And they don't talk very much about them, except for to say, that when they need help, the best thing for them is to talk to other vets. And so, like most veterans, they're not open about the issues, and I understand that, and I'm not going to pry into that. But when they're telling me that what's helping them, then that's enough for me.
Yeah, well, and that wasn't your only bill this session to help veterans. You had another bill, Senate File 489, that aims to ease the burden on our military families when it comes to interring them at a state veterans cemetery. So what have you heard from the veteran community and their families about the need for this type of legislation?
That bill, I think, as far as need goes, that would depend on who you are. It's more of a want, and it's a courtesy. It's a courtesy to the families and the veterans who would like to be buried next to their loved ones. And so that's what that is about. And currently, they can do it for a fee if they're okayed. If this bill had gone through, what it would have done is said there would be no fee, but they would still have to be approved. So.
Is there anything else you would like to see happen when it comes to veterans issues or helping those who've served our country here in Minnesota?
I think that in the last couple of years, I've seen more going towards vets than I have in the past. I think we just need to continue to listen, and when they are willing to open up and tell us what they want, or even get that information through secondary means, we need to continue to do that, because these problems aren't going away. We're still fighting wars, and so we're still being protected. And out of the limited government person that I am, one of the things that I think we talked about before is the government has to see to the security of the people. And if you're not going to look out for the people providing that security, then you should be ashamed of yourself.
Senator, you're also a ranking minority member on the Environment, Climate, and Legacy Committee. So what has come out of that committee this session that you're particularly proud of or excited by?
Well, Veronica, I don't get excited very much. The one thing, I don't generally like too much of what's in these bills, because it's a lot of spending. And I like to dig down in and find out where the spending's going. But the biggest thing with these bills is that in the environmental portions of these bills, we don't see much for cuts. Now, we've got a looming deficit coming at us, a $6 billion deficit. And today in Minnesota, most people don't understand that we're spending right now more than we're taking in the state. And so it didn't seem like there was any effort on the part of the agencies to scale back what they do. There's money sitting out there that is not being used, and I'm having a hard time getting people to understand we need to pull that back in and make them use that money that's sitting in these pots. For instance, the Department of Natural Resources apparently has many unfilled positions right now, which is good. We don't need any more of them, but there's funds sitting there that would be to fill these positions. If that money's there and we're looking at deficits, we can't afford to be having that just sitting there waiting. We can be using that for the current expenses that they have. And those are ways, only some of the ways we can make cuts. The other thing is some of the services, if they're not essential services, we need to start looking at least scaling back or putting a hold on until after we can pull ourselves out of the looming deficit. And those are things I'd like to see in the bill. We'll see what happens.
Senator, what would you say has been your big success this session or an accomplishment that you're proud of?
I don't know that I can say that I've had huge successes. I don't know if anybody can say that this year. With the divided government that we have now in the House, we're looking at probably anything that's going to pass is going to be lights on. For me, that would be a success if we could just do a lights on and very little, if any, new policy and moving forward. Successes for me, I think, would be over the years. A lot of the things that I talked about when I first got here are the same things we're talking about now. And when I first got here, nobody was listening. Nobody was listening to the fact that Minnesota has about a third of our land is in public ownership. That means that 2/3 of the people are paying the taxes to run everything. Well, the other property tax is gone now because it's in public ownership. And people are starting to realize that now. I think we're seeing some movement there to say we need to figure out how much public land is enough, how much we need to keep in private ownership, and keep our state free, or we become tenants of the government.
Well, Senator, if no one's going to say that they have these great successes this session, then maybe that's a sign that we have balanced government this session, right? We have some good compromise going on. But looking forward to next session, it's a policy year, it's the bonding term. Is there anything you're looking forward to then?
I think there's a lot of stuff that we could do in policy in the Environmental Committee, in all committees actually, but I serve on the Environment, so we'll stick with that. And I would like to see more accountability. We don't see a lot of accountability. We don't see reports coming back to us as to what's been done. DNR, for instance, has since the 1970s has been supposed to provide a report every year on their land acquisitions and what they're doing out there. And they've never provided one. It's like 50 years. And so if I could manage to make sure we start getting the reports so people can see what's going on, instead of appropriating money and saying, here you go, and then never checking up on where it's actually going.
Yeah. All right. Well, Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
The Senate is now back to its full strength with 67 sitting senators because this week its newest member was sworn in.
I will now ask Senator-elect Heisman from the 6th District to come forward.
Today I was sworn in and it was incredible being in that space, honored to be there and to have the support of my district to send me here to do the work that needs to be done and to roll up my sleeves and make sure their values are represented well. I campaigned on being extremely conservative, and that is who I am and what I plan to do while I'm down here. Thank you so much to my district and trusting me to come down here and do the work that you've set me to do. Today was really exciting because after session adjourned, many Republicans said, my goodness, you stepped foot on the floor here and all of a sudden we have bipartisan bills that are being passed off the floor. I am Senator Carrie Heisman.
Because Senator Heisman takes office with just 2 weeks left in the legislative session, most of the Senate's committees have already finished meeting. However, an updated list of committee assignments for the rest of the 2025-2026 session will be released soon. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.